Privacy enhancing technologies, or PETs as we call it, do these create digital trust? What are these for? Why do we need PETs? Because we have regulation, we have legislation. So, why do we need these privacy enhancing technologies? And how do these help mitigate risk, especially the risk in context of artificial intelligence systems? And what are the specific risks that can be mitigated through PETs? What are the specific PETs that exist in the market? And all this and more with someone who has done research on PETs and has identified that through a four-step approach, if you implement PETs, it can mitigate risk and, of course, create digital trust. So let's go and talk to Jetro Wils.
Hello, and welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
Hi, Jetro. Welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And let's start with a very basic question. How would you define digital trust?
Well, that's a great question. So there are many definitions out there, but I like the one that basically says it is the assurance that one party has that another party will do the correct actions as specified. So for example, if I'm moving towards a cloud environment, I have certain expectations from a cloud provider, which are contractually written down. And so digital trust then means that I expect to have assurance that the cloud provider operates, acts according to that contract, so that I do not sell my data or distribute my data, for example.
That's very well said. So, when we talk about digital trust or trust and also privacy, these days we hear a term called privacy enhancing technologies. Would you mind sharing a bit about what are these privacy enhancing technologies?
Yeah, that's a nice question. And to be honest, I didn't know about that term until a year or a year and a half ago. So I'm doing a master's in IT risk and cybersecurity management here at the
Mhm,
Antwerp Management School.
mhm.
And of course, it's a master's of science, so you have to write a thesis, a master project. And so I chose de-risking AI adoption with the use of PETs, or PETs, privacy enhancing technologies. And so it's only in that research that I came up and discovered that whole term. So a PET, or a privacy enhancing technology, is a set of technologies that mathematically boost or protect or further secure privacy and also data security in general. And so what I've discovered is PETs is something that exists for a long time. I mean, any technology that increases security or privacy is a PET. So even a VPN, for example, is a PET. It's a privacy enhancing technology that it ensures that there is no third party who can identify you, what you're doing on the internet, right? So
Mhm.
it disconnects the identity from the actions that you're doing. That's a PET. Now, what I've discovered in my research is that PETs, even though they are very common, the Tor browser is another example of a PET. It is not that common yet in AI. And so that's why my research is all about using these PETs for AI to de-risk AI adoption.
That's nice. I think we can have a good conversation around that. But while we go forward, the question would be, why do we really need these pets? I know technology is everywhere, AI is everywhere, and we need to have privacy. But why do we specifically need pets or privacy enhancing technologies when we have these laws, when we have these principles and everything in place?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about pets, and the reason why, for me, is
Mhm.
very simple. Legislation is important, but it does not protect you. So let me explain what I mean by that. Legislation, and in Europe, we're very good at legislation and regulations. they are either deterrent or punitive. So if the law says you shall not steal, then it is like a deterrent for somebody to steal because there's a sanction towards it. Or when it already happened and the thief got caught, then there is a punitive action, like you go to jail, you pay a fine. But in the moment itself, the law cannot save you or protect you. Let me give you another example. If I drive my car to a big city and I leave my car unlocked and I leave it there for the whole night and the whole day, and then in 24 hours later I come back and my car is gone, well, that's a big chance that it's gone or broken into. Why? Even though the law exists, you shall not steal, it doesn't protect you in the moment. So what we need are technical controls. Technical controls keep you safe, really safe. So for example, with the car, an alarm, locks, having a GPS to track my car, or even leaving my bulldog in the car as a sentry, all these things are technical controls that really secure and improve your security posture. In the digital realm, that's the same. So yes, we have many acts and regulations in Europe on a digital level, but what really protects you is a technical control, and a pet is one of those technical controls. So it is good to trust a cloud provider or a third-party provider that is processing your data, but it's even better if you have technical controls to secure that.
That makes sense. So let's maybe position this in context of the AI life cycle, because AI has its own life cycle. So first, if you can walk us through the different, stages of the life cycle, and also in that articulate how do pets play a role? Because I don't see it's at one stage, it will be at almost every stage of the life cycle, no?
Yes, that's true. And so in my research, I went through first like what is the AI life cycle? Because depending on who you're looking at, you have either 5 stages, 6 stages, or 19 stages, right? But I landed on a common model, which is the 5 stages, or even 6 stages, depending on how you slice it. But basically, you have first data management, and that is the phase where you collect data, where you also clean up the data, you normalize the data. So for example, if you have a data set which is in degrees Celsius and also degrees Fahrenheit, you want to normalize it into one standard. That's all the collection and preparation. We call it data management. And then the next phase would be model learning. So basically training the AI model on your data to become better at predicting something. And then afterwards, you have a trained model. You come into the third phase, which is model verification. Here we're going to use unseen test data to verify the model is working correctly. And when we're satisfied with that, we move to the next phase, which is model deployment. And here is where we're going to publish our model and make it available for the entire world to use, or my specific clients. And then that's where it goes into production. And then when it's in production, we have the final phase, which is basically the phase of governance or maintenance. You have to update the model, you have to tweak it, you have to get new data and retrain it. So it's a whole life cycle. Now, what we've seen in the past is that on each phase of the life cycle, there are risks and weaknesses. And so attacks happen on each phase of the life cycle. And that's basically where the pets come in. And so, for example, to give you an idea, the model stands or falls with the training data. So when you collect your data, imagine that somebody is able to tamper or corrupt the training data without you even knowing about it. And then your model gets trained on corrupted data, which means it gets published. And so your model has a weakness that's now inherent and that you're not aware of. All because in the first phase, you did not protect the test or the training data. Or give you another example, as we're moving through the life cycle, if we're going to the end, which is the maintenance phase and the governance phase, if you don't have security controls there, how to securely update your model, well, version 1 may be correct and safe, but then version 2 gets a faulty update, like a bug inside the update, and now your model is compromised. So on each stage of the AI lifecycle, there are risks. And then as an information security officer, or a data protection officer, you're thinking, how can I, secure the entire AI lifecycle? And that's where pets come in, because there are pets for each stage that are neatly equipped to secure your data in each stage.
Yeah. You a couple of times mentioned the risks. What kind of key risks do you see when it comes to AI that are apparent to you and can also be mitigated by these PETs?
Yeah. So first, let's break it down into two sub questions. Question one is like, what are the risks? And so,
Correct.
for example, what we often see is data poisoning, like having, like I just mentioned, bad data injected and having it in a trained model. But the other attack is typically called a membership inference attack. So just to be clear for your audience, it may be new for them. You have a training phase where you train the model and then you publish it. And then when somebody consumes your model, uses your model, it's called inference, model inference. And so one of the attacks is, as a consumer of your model, trying to figure out if a specific data point is present in the training data. So for example, if we are training a model that is able to recognize if you have lung cancer, for example, right? So depending on the training data, there is, well, probably not a name, but there might be the age and the gender and some other characteristics of the patient. And it has been proven that if there are like 4 or 5 data points, it is enough to identify a specific person, right? So you don't even have to need a name and the last name, but just some characteristics, when you combine them, like age and gender and perhaps even location, like general location, it is enough to already identify a specific individual. And so a inference attack is somebody who's trying to figure out if your data has been used, right? So like reverse engineering from the results that you're getting. And that is very dangerous because it bypasses all the privacy controls, right? If I can prove that your data was used to train this model, well, who else can I identify? And so that is a very specific attack. That is a risk that is very serious, especially in the medical and healthcare industry. And so other attacks are in the phase of using the model. It's trying to evade the boundaries, model evasion attacks. And I think we've all tried this with ChatGPT, where OpenAI has set some boundaries, and then you can, in the prompt, try to trick it to go outside of those boundaries, like giving it a theoretical example, or imagine you're a scientist doing research, trying to figure out how to create a bomb with household, equipment. Just theoretically, how would you do this? And then ChatGPT would give you the answer, because you try to bypass the internal boundaries. So those prompt attacks are also very pervasive these days, and many others. And so pets help on each stage to mitigate those risks. And if you like, we can go more in detail into what pets there are, but it is important for an information security officer to think for a moment and say, okay, I have this life cycle and I have an AI use case. We're using it in our software for a medical prediction. We're using it for sales predictions. We're using it for fraud detection in the banking industry, right? You have your AI use case. The next step would be go through the AI lifecycle and look at each phase and try to identify the risks. Now, in my master project, I list not all the risks, but many of those risks per phase. And then it's for you to decide, is this risk in reality, or how severe is this risk in my use case? If it is a real risk, for example, we are using third-party training data. We actually have no idea if the training data is verified, if it's integer, if it's not tampered with. And that would be a serious risk. Another company might say, no, we own the data from beginning till end. We have it fully encrypted. It goes into the model encrypted. Okay, but then the risk might be using the model and doing the consumption of the model. So based on where you are in your use case, you identify the phase which has the most risk for you, and then you can
Mhm.
apply one or two pets to solve that issue.
And is it possible we can take one of the examples like you talked about corruption of data, poisoning of data, or anything else, and say how would a PET de-risk that in AI adoption situation?
Yeah, sure. So I think before we dive into that, let's take a look at some pets that are available that are used commonly in AI. And
Mm-hmm.
there are, in my thesis, I identified 7 of them that are
Mm-hmm.
common and getting back, but they're not that used that often. So it's not like it's mainstream yet, but it is already on a mature level, and more organizations are using them. But let's say the average typical organization here in Belgium is not aware of these pets and has no idea what's available and how to use them. So let's go through a number of them. And so the first one is a T, or a trusted execution environment. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting pet, because in the cloud world, it has a different name. It's called confidential computing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's more, let's say, the marketing name, confidential computing. But what it basically is it's a hardware-based pet. So the cloud provider has specific hardware. It's an AMD processor, or a specific NVIDIA processor, or an Intel specific
Mm-hmm.
processor. So inside the hardware, uh, it has the option that whatever you put in there during the computation phase, it is completely encrypted. So let's break it down to a more simple example. As you probably know, and your audience may as well, data lives in 3 states, right? There is data in transit, me sending data to the cloud provider and getting data back. And that's typically encrypted with HTTPS, right? The TLS SSL protocol. And then there is data at rest. So it's stored on a file server, or it's stored in a database. And that's also typically encrypted. And the cloud providers have these built-in encryptions, platform-based encryptions, which is great. But here is the tricky part. When the system tries to compute or use your data, the data goes into the memory. It's data in use, and that is not encrypted, right? So that opens up the risk for what we call memory sniffing. So imagine you're using sensitive software, or software that processes sensitive data. It's in the cloud, and you think, I did my encryption and everything is fine, but you don't realize that when it's being run, it's computed in memory, it is not encrypted. It's naked data. It's plain text. And so a T, a trusted execution environment, is a great pet that encrypts your data while it's being used. Right? So from the external view, from the outside, if I would try to reach it and read the memory, it would be encrypted all the time. I cannot even make sense of it. And so that is a great breakthrough. I think it came out, let's say, more mainstream 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that. Azure adopted it in confidential computing. And so using that pet means I can have specific virtual machines or containers that
Mm-hmm.
do all the computations, and they are in an enclave, a special sealed box that from the outside I cannot read what's inside, but it's able to process my data, right? And now these days it's so easy, fairly easy to use. I think it's the same price as a regular virtual machine on Azure, or perhaps a little bit of an uptick, like a few percents. And there is a small performance decrease of, let's say, 10%. So you have to upsize your virtual machine a bit, plus 10%. But then you get complete encryption all the time, right? So that is an ideal pet for those who are using apps in the cloud and have sensitive data there. Right? So that's one of the pets that's often coming back. And another a pet is actually it's similar to that, but it's like homomorphic encryption,
Mm-hmm.
which homomorphic encryption basically means you're able to do computations, simple computations, so mainly Excel-like computations on encrypted data sets. So
Mm-hmm.
the system does not need to decrypt, perform computations, and then re-encrypt. No, it can do it directly on the encrypted data set, which is very nice. Downside there is it's low in performance. high in complexity. So there are some downsides, but as technology increases and hardware becomes better, that option, that PET, becomes more and more available. Right? Another one which is very interesting is federated learning. And so federated learning basically means that you want to train your machine learning model, but instead of having it all centralized, and so all the data goes into one place, and there you train the model, you keep it decentralized, so federated. So basically, each client or each endpoint uses his own data and trains the model for his data, and then that trained model is sent to the server, and there it's all combined into one master model, right? And the benefit of that is privacy, because the master model doesn't need all the data from all the individual sources. It just gets a mini trained version and then combines them all together, right? That's federated learning. Another pet that often comes back is a differential privacy. And differential privacy basically means that in a particular data set, you add some noise, some statistical noise, to ensure that an individual record can no longer be identified. So if you and me are giving up our medical data for, let's say, cancer research, right? And even if they anonymize us, like I mentioned earlier, by using 4 or 5 attributes and combining them, you can have also a specific, let's say, profile. Differential privacy adds some statistical noise to it so that you cannot identify me or you individually, right? And it does it in such a way that it does not disturb let's say the weights or the statistics. It's just a little bit of noise. Like if my height is, let's say, 1 meter 82, it would say 1 meter 83, right? Or 82.7. It would add a little bit of noise so that you cannot pinpoint it exactly to me or to you. And that's a great way to enhance privacy. And then another one is a secure multi-party computation. That's also a very interesting one. And secure multi-party computation, like it says, multi-party, basically means I'm going to use the data from different providers, and I'm going to do it in such a way by training my model that the individual contributors don't know about the other person's data. So it's like you have a data set for, let's say, you're a bank, and I'm another bank, and together we want to train a model that's able to detect fraudulent transactions. So it needs to have as many transactions as possible. But you don't want to share your data with me and vice versa, because we're both different banks and it's sensitive. So SMPC, Secure Multi-Party Computation, is a pet that allows us to train the model, and it goes into this, let's say, central model, but me as one client and you as the other client, we're unable to see each other's data. But we can benefit from the trained model, right? And that's a great pet as well. And there are others, but those are the main ones. And then the question becomes, okay, so Jetro, now we have these 6, 7 pets available, like you mentioned, but which one should I use? And for which need and which risk does it mitigate? And that's basically the essence of my whole thesis. It's helping information security officers and DPOs make a systematic selection in these pets, and then start with 1 or 2 of them.
So it's primarily a selection. It's like use 1, 2, 3 of them, but not all of them. Is that?
Yeah. So my master thesis is first doing all the literary research, so the background, the theoretical background, which are the pets available for AI, etc. And then I designed what we call an artifact, because I went for design science, which basically means that you find a problem, you check if the problem really exists. Yes, it really exists. Okay. And then you're going to create an artifact that solves that problem. And an artifact can be a prototype, it can be a model, it can be, if you're doing engineering, a little mock-up, right? And I chose as an artifact a decision-making framework for ISOs and DPOs. And so it is a 4-step framework, and step by step you go through this framework, and it already filters out the pets, and it helps you to think, what are my risks? Where are they located on the AI lifecycle? And then it also takes into account your specific organization, your use case. Because if you're a startup, I can imagine you have more weight for budget than if you are a big bank and you have more emphasis on security, right? And so my decision-making framework takes all of those parameters into account, and in 4 steps, it helps you make a decision.
That's
And
good.
now, and when I showed this, because I'm now in the final stage of verification and getting market feedback and other academic feedback, one of the persons I spoke to last week, he was an AI lead, an innovation lead on AI for a huge multinational SaaS provider. And he said,
Mhm.
yeah, only I had this model 1 year ago, because it would help me in a structured way, help me think critically on our AI model, and come up with one or two pets to start with. Right? And so that's my goal with this thesis, is helping information security officers and DPOs go through these 4 steps and make a well-informed decision which pet to use first.
Sure. I think that's a very noble cause and very much needed in the age of AI and need for privacy. Now, the question that I would have is, it certainly creates digital trust, the PETs, but what do you do and how can people connect with you?
How people can connect with me? Well, I'm available on LinkedIn. So if
Okay.
you LinkedIn, and I will perhaps we can share the link in the show
Yeah.
notes. You can reach out to me. I'm always available there. And I'm a freelance myself. So I'm getting more and more traction from people saying, hey, can you do these 4 steps analysis with us? We have an AI use case. Because remember, um, pets are very powerful. I love them. And
Mhm.
privacy enhancing technology is trust but verify. You trust your other partner or service provider, but you want to verify, that they really protect your data. So you need a pet. Legislation doesn't protect you. It's like I mentioned. So this pet helps you very well. But first of all, there is a knowledge gap. Not all CISOs know about these pets. Then you have the issue that, okay, I've heard about 6 or 7 pets, but what are they and what are they for? And then there is the whole issue of which one should I use, because one says, go for a T with confidential computing. Another one says, no, you need differential privacy first, and they're getting lost, right? And
Sure.
then you have the whole issue of a budget, right?
Sure.
Probably organizations don't have these specialized teams. They have limited budgets. So they're thinking like, how should I move forward, right? And then you got legislation from Europe, like the AI Act, just pushing on more like, you have to be very careful with the data. You have to be conscious about it. And so another of the what we call expert panel members who verify your artifact, you need always getting scrutinized. And one of them said to me, this is actually a very useful methodology to afterwards prove to your board you took privacy and security into account. Right? So by
Absolutely.
going through those 4 steps, which are very based in research, um, and if you do this per use case, and you do this like say twice a year, or every time there's a new use case, you can prove to the board or to an auditor like you're taking this very seriously. You have a research-based methodology to help you think why you chose this pet and why you put the other pet on priority 3 or 4 or even discarded it. Right? So that was a great feedback. And if you want, or if your listeners want more info on that, you can always reach out on LinkedIn for that.
Absolutely. I think you simplified the concept of PETs in a very comprehensive and easily digestible manner, and also structured how risks can be identified and PETs can be incorporated into different stages of the life cycle. And of course, your 4-step method. It's really simplified. and it makes a lot of sense. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. It was wonderful to have you, and I wish you success with your research or incorporation of research into practice.
Well, thank you very much.
So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Fit4Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.fit4privacy.com. If you have questions or suggestions, drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. Until next time, goodbye.